sesión está comenzando.
Good morning to everybody from New York. This is Robert Madeira, and I am the Managing Director of the CW Group, and together with two of our analysts, João and Carolina, we will today giving you a little bit of overview of the ground and precipitated calcium carbonate industry. We recently completed a study on the sector, and from that study, we are sharing some of the highlights that we think that the industry can find interesting, and this is sort of the starting point for conversation. So if anyone throughout this presentation has any questions or afterwards has any questions, feel free to reach out to any of the presenters or your account manager, and we'll be happy to continue the conversation there. So for those that don't really yet sort of know how we typically approach our different reports, and studies, these are very comprehensive, and we really do cover a lot of different factors. And today we'll sort of go through various aspects and give you also an introduction to the CW Group for those that are less familiar with who we are. So CW Group, just very quickly, we're advisory research and sort of market intelligence group that cover a lot of the heavy industrial segments. As many of you already know, we are in particular active in the building materials, cement, and sort of related chemicals up and downstream, different sectors, but also work across other sectors like metals and paper and pulp. And we, of course, combine all of that into sort of advisory. And we do everything from strategic advisor to M&A support and sort of problem solving for senior management across companies. And that's sort of both supply chain, business decisions, market entries, feasibility. That's founded to some extent in our research work, where we provide different studies on sector reports. So these are like syndicated materials and commodity price assessments, forecasts, and a lot of synthesized and proprietary data that sort of we bring to bear for the advisor projects, or provide companies on a standalone basis to use and form their own decisions. On our media side, we have market reporting. You're with SEM Week and BM Week and a lot of other publications that we have to track the industry on an ongoing basis and sort of both from a market move perspective as well as online services around data and sort of timely updates as to what's going on in the industry. So let's dive in a little bit more sort of into today's report, which is the ground precipitated calcium carbonate. And this is a very comprehensive study that we did in the fall, right before sort of the end of the year. And really bottom-up looking sort of by sector, understanding what's driving it, what's making really the sector tick. We covered a global basis, and then we dive into sort of about a dozen key markets around the world that really drive the global demand profile. We don't just sort of sit at our desktops and sort of Google our way to sort of oblivion or to the answers as it may be, but this is formed on extensive primary research discussing with industry participants, our own, of course, understanding of the sector, to bring really a high sort of quality and insightful market report that people can really leverage in formulating the business decisions within this sector, how to get into it, where to capture opportunities. And it's, we always emphasize a forward-looking component in this and sort of have a view, sort of 5-year view. Obviously, we also provide historicals, but really trying to answer where the industry is headed and sort of, what opportunities may lie ahead. We draw on a lot of different inputs to create this, and we, of course, have our own qualitative and quantitative analyses that sort of form part of the sort of data modeling exercise. And that's then complemented with the industry expertise and sort of our in-house data that sort of draw on primary interviews, as I mentioned previously, which of course are the sort of big differentiator, and sort of this is what sets CW apart from a lot of sort of other companies in the space that, with our, one of our most extensive Rolodexes in the world, sort of when it comes to these spaces, we really make sure to validate information and sort of obtain different people's and professionals' opinions. So we get that texture and granularity in terms of information that's we sort of pride ourselves on so developing both for clients on a consulting basis as well as in these syndicated reports. So if we sort of look at the GCC and PCC sector, we're going to answer some of the top level questions in the industry. What does it look like, and sort of what is it that this actually is at the end of the day. Again, this is a high level. We're having a fairly short webinar just to sort of highlight some things, and if there are questions, we're happy to sort of jump into those afterwards, and the context will come at the end of this presentation. So I guess the first question is, what's really GCC and what's PCC, right? And many of the participants in this call no doubt already know what it is, but for those that may be less familiar, these are at the end of the day very sort of refined calcium carbonate type of components, and sort of synthetic or purified calcium carbonates, and sort of they are refined in the sense and sort of high performance because the applications that they used in, which I'll get into in a bit of a second. But the ground one is as sort of as sort of it says, it's sort of a ground process where you sort of take lime, different lime components as a starting point, and you grind down to small to powder. Whereas the precipitated uses a precipitation process to come up with much smaller components that sort of that we sort of get like a different level of purity with, and sort of a higher performance component in the end of the product. And that sort of product, that the performance is really driven sort of by the shape and as well as sort of the size of each of the particles that we get out of precipitation, and therefore lends itself to a different set of products. So of course then the PCC, it's a more expensive premium product used in applications that require that smaller particle size, sort of sealants, adhesives, plastics, rubbers, inks, pharmaceutical, sort of food grade type of applications. And the ground one is typically a little bit more sort of in agricultural, industrial, and sort of other applications. In the PCC, you have sort of coated and uncoated, and sort of the coating, it's a very low percentage type of coating, typically with some sort of acid, fatty acid, and sort of they get enhanced with that coating to increase dispersibility in sort of the end use application as a sort of polymer or solvent or something like that, that sort of then increases the performance and efficiency of the PCC in itself. So it has more sort of value added applications, and of course that for that reason it is also a more costly product. And Oops. The industry then that sort of supplies the sector has sort of its unique structure. Given that there is a fair amount of industries that are critically reliant on this sector, you have both sort of free market as well as an integrated, vertically integrated production slice of this market. And the free market sort of is, as it sort of sounds, it's sort of typical commercial arrangements, selling, part of or meeting part of the global demand. But then you have part of the global consumption that really sort of, in particular, downstream are built in conjunction with paper mills or pulp mills to sort of provide that product in a more reliant, more steady, more sort of cost control visibility. Even though in some cases the operation of those plants are outsourced to third parties under very long-term agreements, but that's more sort of an operating expertise and sort of core competency perspective. But what's important there to know is sort of from a demand and production perspective, right? It's like when we think about global demand, there's a large part of the demand that's actually not really sort of quote unquote available to sort of meet, and that's sort of one of the characteristics in this space that's a little different maybe than in some sectors, given that vertical integration. You also have vertical integration sort of upstream, which is there are some that manufacture or produce the GCC and in particular PCC on a standalone basis, buying the sort of feedstock, be sort of hydrogen lime or some other starting point from third parties, but the GCC and PCC plants, and the PCC in particular, then are sort of integrated into the quick lime operations or some other lime type of operation. So in this, from different from other sectors, you have a little bit more of that sort of combination up and downstream. And if you look then at sort of what's making this industry tick, right? In the paper sector, we really have both a GCC and PCC, but typically sort of PCC is for the higher, premium quality type of papers, uses fillers and sort of other applications there, and sort of the demand for GCC and PCC, of course, then is driven to no small extent by paper, and in particular, sort of looking at sort of emerging markets and sort of how they, their uptake of different paper products as sort of climb up the economic development ladder accelerates sort of that demand for that end-use product. Plastics, also an important sector, similar in demand drivers to the paper, a little different, but this is sort of a key component into certain plastics, the PVC plastics, to sort of give them special properties and attributes that sort of are desirable. And then there are other sectors that are also important, like paintings and coatings and sort of adhesives and sealants. And sort of beyond that, you have sort of rubber, food, and sort of other sectors as well, to provide different types of special products and maybe sort of the substitutes, like the cheaper, sort of titanium dioxide for painting. So it has both sort of primary use and sort of enabler and sort of a potential substitute. And all of these sectors are sectors that we sort of look at in building up that global demand. It's not sort of just saying, hey, demand is whatever. No, we look at each sector, seeing how they're evolving and by region, and then so we build that up to really inform ourselves as to what's driving that demand going forward. So that sort of changes gears a little bit for the presentation, and we'll start going into now some of the numbers. Again, very high level numbers that we'll present to you. And if you have questions afterwards, of course, there's a lot more in the report for those that sort of are interested in buying that, and feel free to reach out to us as well to sort of have that conversation. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to one of our analysts that worked on this report, Carolina, and she'll take you through the market size and sort of the different products the product segments, I should say, that are out there. So on that note, Carolina, please proceed.
Thank you, Robert. Hello, everyone. I'm Carolina, and I will start by giving an overall view of the demand highlights. We are going to explain, first of all, how big is the market. Regarding market size by value, we can clearly see a significant difference between GCC and PCC markets. The PCC market value is higher mainly due to its price being almost 4 times higher than GCC. The total market price will experience a slow, although still robust, growth, largely because of the slower growth in the PCC demand and even a negative growth of the GCC market pricing. A faster PCC market value growth in the next 5 years is attributed to, first of all, increasing prices, and second of all, an increase of demand for PCC in detriment of GCC. Now, moving on to regional demand distribution. Unlike other regions whose shares of total PCC and GCC consumption have remained quite stable over the years, demand in the Asia Pacific, mainly in China of course, climbed at a fast pace, currently making for around 36-35% of total global PCC and GCC consumption. The fastest growing industry is Asia Pacific region have been the plastics, paintings, and coating segments, where the paper industry improved up to 2015, and when it saw a downturn in China. Demand for PCC and GCC will likely decline in European and CIS markets due to a expected slowdown of paper manufacturing, a trend which we see intensifying in the coming years. The market size in tonnage of the Middle Eastern and African region have remained fairly stable over the past 5 years, largely because there is a lack of premium paper production in both regions, and the fact there has been actually no significant developments augmenting the size of the paper industry in these regions. Thank you. I will now pass the presentation to my colleague João.
All right, thank you, Carolina, and hello, everybody. So now, regarding paper, plastic, paints and coatings, and sealants in terms of evolution, all of these end users have two things in common. China being the country where most production is concentrated, and all of these end users industry have positive production growth estimated between 2014 and 2024. Now, regarding paper, despite of a global paper production increase in this period, to be more specific, between 2017 and 2018, global paper production registered a decrease. This is mainly attributed to a shutdown of several paper mills in the United States due to fierce competition from China, and also attributed to the shutdown of several paper mills in China, mainly due to the ban on waste paper imports. Regarding plastic, global plastic production is increasing at a faster rate than other materials like paper, and it is predicted to continue to do so. This is mainly attributed to plastic being a cheaper and lighter material than the other alternatives. Now, regarding paints and coatings, despite of the predicted production growth in this period, this production growth might be hindered by possible future new air pollution regulations that might come up. And finally, regarding adhesives and sealants, this continuous production growth predicted is mainly attributed to a recovery in the construction and automotive industries, and also on growing middle class in Asia Pacific. Now, regarding GCC and PCC consumption by end user, and looking at this bubble chart, the main takeaway from this slide is that PCC consumption is continuously replacing GCC consumption over the last few years, mainly in the paper products segment, as the high-quality paper segment is gaining force over the last few years. And as we spoke before, PCC being a kind of filler, more indicator for higher quality products or higher quality paper products, due to, despite of being more expensive, providing better brightness and better opacity for paper products. PCC consumption is increasing rapidly in the paper products segments. Only Asia Pacific and Middle East regions have a positive CAGR on GCC consumption, as the premium paper industry in these two regions is still in the development phase. Premium paper segment in these two regions still isn't as developed as in the other regions. This is the main reason. And regarding bubble size, paper products have the highest consumption of GCC and PCC, but consumption per ton of end user is highest in adhesives and sealants. Now, finally, regarding market risks and future considerations, GCC and PCC have several substitutes for each end user. Regarding paper, main substitutes for GCC and PCC are kaolin and titanium dioxide. Despite of them being the main substitutes of GCC and PCC, GCC and PCC GCC and PCC is increasingly being more used in comparison with these substitutes, mainly due to GCC and PCC being cheaper and more widely available. Regarding the plastics end users, the main substitutes of GCC and PCC are talc and silica. Despite of talc and silica being the main substitutes, GCC and PCC have several advantages over these two products, such as GCC and PCC provide higher stiffness to plastic products, and this is particularly important in the PVC segment, which represents a big chunk of the end user structures of GCC PCC. Besides higher stiffness, GCC and PCC are easier processed, and they have better anti-blocking properties. Also, GCC and PCC offer substantial environmental benefits by minimizing the carbon footprint of plastic products. Now, regarding risks of the industry of GCC PCC, significant risks for PCC and GCC are possible future new environmental regulations that can limit plastic consumption. This poses as a real threat to the plastics industry, because if new environmental regulations come up, obviously this might hinder future plastic production. And if this happens, as plastics represent a considerable chunk of the end user structure of GCC PCC, the consumption of these two products might as well reduce a lot because of these new regulations. So finally, these environmental regulations subject makes us ask one question. As environmental regulations become stricter, will PCC and GCC gain advantage in the future over its substitutes? Well, everything indicates the answer to this question to be a yes, because as said before, by using PCC and GCC in the plastics industry, petrochemical and energy usage is reduced during the manufacturing process. And besides this, also the usage of calcium carbonate as a filler in the plastic industry also limits the carbon footprint and greenhouse impact of finished plastic products. So that's it for today, guys. We hope you enjoyed our presentation. Here are our email contacts if you have any further questions or any doubts. In the coming 2 days or 3 days, you're going to receive an email with the PDF file of this presentation and also an MP4 file with the recording of this presentation. We hope you enjoy our presentation and have a good day. See you.